Hi, I'm Colin. We're going to solve the following quadratic equation, x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0, using the method of factorization. Firstly, we note that this is an equation because it contains an equal sign. And since we have an x squared term with no powers higher than 2, it is thus a quadratic equation. Whenever you solve a quadratic equation, you should always first put it into a standard form, where the right-hand side is 0. Now, there are several methods you can use to solve quadratic equations. The method you should always try first is factorization, which is what we're going to focus on in this module. For simple quadratic equations, factorization is generally quick, reliable, and efficient. If you find it difficult to factorize, you can use something called the quadratic formula instead, which will be covered in another module. There is also another method called completing the square. Alright, let's factorize the quadratic expression. We cover the details for doing this in another module. In a nutshell, we need to guess two numbers, which when multiplied together gives the constant term 6. And when added together gives 5, the middle coefficient. If you think about this for long enough, you'll realize that the combination 2 and 3 works, since their product is 6 and their sum gives 5. Therefore, the quadratic expression factorizes to x plus one of these numbers, say 2, times x plus the other one, 3. So this allows us to rewrite our original quadratic equation as the following, where the quadratic on the left-hand side has now been factorized. Now, the reason why we factorize the quadratic is due to something called the Null Factor Law. It's based on the premise that if you multiply two numbers together, both of which are not 0, you certainly will end up with another non-zero number. More formally, the Null Factor Law states the following. If you multiply two numbers a and b together and happen to get 0, then at least one of these factors must be 0. So coming back to our quadratic equation, observe that we precisely have a situation where we have the product of two expressions that end up being 0. The Null Factor Law therefore states that at least one of these factors must be 0 for this to happen. That is, either x plus 2 is equal to 0, or x plus 3 is equal to 0. Thus, we have reduced the quadratic equation into a pair of simpler linear equations. Now, subtracting 2 from both sides, the solution to the first equation is therefore negative 2. And subtracting 3 from both sides, the solution to the other equation is therefore negative 3. Thus, this quadratic equation has two solutions, x equals negative 2 and x equals negative 3. These solutions are sometimes called roots of the quadratic function x squared plus 5x plus 6. We can also write the solution in set notation as follows. The solutions to this equation is the set comprising of the two integers -2 and -3. Generally, quadratic equations will always have a maximum of two solutions, but sometimes they may just admit one solution, and sometimes none at all. Finally, if you sketch the graph of this quadratic, it turns out that these roots, -2 and -3, are precisely where the graph intersects the x-axis. In other words, -2 and -3 are the x-intercepts. Graph sketching will be covered in more detail in later modules. Alright, hope you enjoyed that. See you next time.